Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. New Zealand serve up another all-time classic of a test match, beating Sri Lanka by the barest of margins with a final ball of the Christchurch test. That result means that India will face Australia in the World Test Championship final. Those two drew the final test of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy, while an extremely imbalanced England side lost 3 T20Is of little significance to them, but great significance to the victors Bangladesh. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is Ben Gardner and Joe Harman. Mark Butcher will be dialing in from Pakistan later in the show. Let's start with that New Zealand test match. All four results very much on going into the final over of the fifth day. New Zealand needed 8 runs. Sri Lanka needed 3 wickets. Sri Lanka needed that win to retain hopes of World Test Championship final qualification. And Kane Williamson, with an unbeaten fourth innings 100, dives in as he and the injured Neil Wagner scramble through for a bye to the keeper. Williamson is in by an inch. New Zealand win another classic. Ben, just a ridiculous finish and one to rival, maybe even trump the one against England a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I guess when you look at it just in terms of the pure historic nature of it, and actually what happens more often is it runs being chased at the very, very last scheduled ball of the fifth day, or is it wins following on? It's actually winning on the last ball of the fifth day that's rarer. So from that point of view, it's trumped it. This was just absolutely incredible. And the last half hour in particular just had kind of everything from a point when, I guess that's the thing with these chases, that even though it often looks like a team is kind of home and dry and kind of way out in front and that sort of thing, so often they just seem to get tight when they don't. Like a team sees the finishing line and suddenly weird things start happening. It was so good. Adi Sharma wrote a really good piece on this site, just recapping that half hour and all the crazy things that happened. Just things like even just details with like the DJ just really amping up. I think it was Sandstorm by Darude was the soundtrack just before the final over started, and just before the final ball, the floodlights just all of a sudden all just kick into action as if it's like this is the final moment now. This is what's going to happen. It was so good, and also it was just a brilliant test overall as well. And I guess maybe from that point of view, it's got the edge on the England test, because that was one where England were just way out in front, and then the rest just New Zealand slowly clawing that back. Whereas this did ebb and flow more. I guess on day one you had Kusal Mendes batting like a dream, Southee bowling really well, and then New Zealand were 180 for 6 or something, and then come back through a Mitchell 100 and Matt Henry had a really good game, probably unlucky not to be player of the match with a rapid 70 and 7 wickets. And then Angelo Matthews is kind of a little bit of a master of the third innings sometimes. Like he just knows how to navigate those situations and to extract the absolute most out of it. And then obviously the final day, and one as well that, because I was sort of thinking like might stay up to watch quite a bit of this, and then it was raining, and you think like, oh, that's going to be a real shame if Sri Lanka's kind of World Test Championship tilt is just ruined by rain on the last day and they got themselves in such a good position. And actually they ended up helping things, because it was that sort of the squeezed time as well, which made New Zealand's chase so audacious and made it that it was just that much more likely to have that very, very last ball drama as we saw.
Gonna have to bring you up on your pronunciation of Darude. I'm pretty sure it's Darude, isn't it?
Is it Darude? Okay.
Pretty sure. Yeah. Anyway,
Yaz would know in these matters.
It is just great, Ben, to see Sri Lanka doing this well. I know it's a shame that they didn't qualify for the final, but it's been a quite few years.
Is it definitely a shame? I was thinking this morning, because you've got the underdog story, which is obviously compelling, and in the wider context of Test cricket, it's great to see sides outside the big three who don't get those opportunities doing well. But when it comes to the Oval in June, would we really want Sri Lanka up against Australia in these conditions? Maybe different if we're in Asia, but I think the final, I think we've got the right final, really, in terms of the WTC in its infancy needs all the kind of energy and oxygen it can get, and it's going to get that from Australia, India. And I think they have been the best two sides over this cycle, really. I think the table sort of does everything justice. And I think you always get that in world tournaments, in whatever sport really. A few shocks along the way are great and really exciting, but when you get to the really big games, you kind of want the best sides playing each other, I think, as a personal view, because that's kind of what you sign up for in the first place. So, not obviously, I wouldn't have begrudged Sri Lanka if they'd got there. It would have been a great story, but I'm pretty pleased with the way things have played out, really.
I think you're right, actually, having been quite on the romantic side of the romantic side of the story with, if Sri Lanka got there, that would have been nice in my head. And also it just would have been funny as well if, India with all their might somehow miss out, but like almost through their own fault, I guess. But I think you are right about that. I guess the only thing is to say on Sri Lanka is that they are good. Like they genuinely deserved the chance that they got at the final. And I mean, trying to work out kind of why they're good, and to begin with, didn't get much more beyond them. They have lots of really good batters. They always produce lots of good spinners, and they have a growing group of fast bowlers, and they always seem to have 3 at least who are fit that they can pick and can do a job, I guess. Like, because even in this game they didn't have Vishwa Fernando wasn't in this game. They didn't have Pathum Nissanka as well. I mean, because Pereira has been out of the frame for a while, but that's like there is strength in depth.
For a long time, they've had lots of batters who are clearly very talented and have, in short bursts, done very well. But it's been rare where multiple Sri Lankan batters have had good runs over a period of time. And actually, looking at the top 7, is like you'd expect that is one of the stronger batting lineups and more stable batting lineups in Test cricket at the moment.
And it seems like more and more they can actually really bank on those players who should be bankers. Like I think sometimes you get an issue with sides when a player becomes established and they can have a run of poor form and it's a weak side, so there's no one really pushing the door down to get in for them, and actually that can be something on the backwards. Like Chandimal now is having like a sort of a second peak or whatever. He's like averaged 100 last year, I think. And I know we've talked about Chris Silverwood before, but it is worth reiterating. It was a really brave move to go straight back into coaching an international team, especially, doesn't speak the language, right after what had happened with England. And you could easily have just said, I'm just going to take a bit of a break off. I'm sure there would have been a county gig going when he felt like he wanted to get back in, but he chose to do this. I guess his experience of coaching in a slightly volatile environment has paid off. And I think there's an element as well where he's able to sort of just cut through the noise and just focus just on the group of players he has in front of him. Like he gets handed a group. He's like, fine, I'm gonna take these and do what I can. And as much as it's Sri Lanka just have good players, you do have to give him credit for the fast bowlers being as good as they are. Even for Chandimal being as good as he was last year. Like if you can't credit the coach for for players important performing under them, what can you credit him for? So yeah.
Alex asks, of the Fad 4, who is the greatest Test match player? I think you can make a good argument for all 4 of them, but if you have to pick one, who are you going for? Alex says it's Steve Smith. I personally don't think it's Williamson, but this was just another reminder of just how good he is. And during the Test matches, overall career average went above that of Sachin Tendulkar, and he's only played 3 Tests fewer than Smith, who I think is widely agreed to be the best Test player of the 4. But he's only got 3 fewer centuries as well. Joe, it's an extraordinary record, and there were murmurings that maybe that because of his dodgy elbow, he might have lost it a little bit, and then he gave up the captaincy not that long ago. But that's 305 games now in the post-captaincy phase of his career. And he's only 32. You kind of forget that given how long he was captain for. But he could still have a very long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible record he's put together, particularly at home. I think, yeah, when long-standing captains give up the role, there's always that question, how are they going to slot back into the ranks? Is their ego going to be able to handle it? Are they just going to slip away from Test cricket quite quickly? I don't think those concerns were ever there with Williamson, because that's just not his character, really. I think, if anything, it suits him better to be in the background. He was a very good captain, but he wasn't necessarily a kind of demonstrative captain who led from the front in an obvious sense. Gary Stead, the New Zealand coach, said at the time of his retirement, this might give us a few more years of Williamson in Test cricket. And I think that's probably what they're going to get. I think it looks really promising. Tim Southee is a 34-year-old seamer as their captain. Feels like nothing more than a stopgap. But I think when you look at the whole situation, I think it's actually falling quite well for New Zealand here. And Williamson's record, in my head, I thought he'd had a bit of a blip, to be honest. And I was looking at his record, and he hasn't really. I think one thing that's maybe developed a bit in his later career is he gets a few more low scores, but when he gets in, he goes big. Which actually, at the very start of his career, he made a lot of 50s and didn't go on to hundreds. I'm talking a long time ago now. He's just, once he's in, he's just almost impossible to dislodge, and he can play in various different ways. He can play more expansively when the situation requires. And I think, again, when you're talking about a player of his age who has given up the captaincy in Test cricket, you think, well, maybe do you move away from Test cricket? Do you just play the shorter formats? And Williamson's a very good white ball player, but he's so clearly best at Test cricket. So clearly better suits his makeup as a player, his mentality as a player, that I don't think there's a risk of that happening really either. So I think, we could have another 5-6 years of Kane Williamson as a Test cricketer. His numbers could be absolutely astonishing by the end if he's got the will and determination to do it. And I think he's, of the big four, the Fab Four, there are advantages and disadvantages to being from New Zealand. You don't get to play as much. It's obviously a significant disadvantage, but you also don't have the levels of pressure that Root, that Kohli and Smith have had. And I think that probably benefits longevity as well. So, we might have quite a few more years of this. Can I just say, before we move on, that Ben mentioned Daryl Mitchell's innings, but what a player he's become.
Yeah.
Because he's averaging 59 in Test cricket now from 17 Test matches, so it's not a tiny sample size. That's 20 runs more than his first class average. It's kind of sort of Labuschagne-esque, really, and that it is a player that there was almost no signs that this was going to happen, and it still feels, in the case of Mitchell, a bit odd that it has, but he's doing it for long enough that you kind of have to just say, well, maybe he is that good a player, even though perhaps people didn't anticipate he would be. He usually saves it for England, but this innings was really, Williamson played the headline innings, but Mitchell, I think Ben rightly said that Matt Henry had a brilliant game and should have been in the mix for player of the match, but I think Mitchell deserved it for that first innings 100 and then the 80, which effectively allowed Williamson's knock to be a match-winning one.
No, Mitchell's career is amazing. I guess he just has like a level of assurance in his own game, and that late entry to Test cricket might help some players with that. But his record, it becomes a point where he's properly in the conversation for, like, you come up with your hypothetical world 11s, but averaging 59 off 17 tests is pretty good going. Ben, just a word on Neil Wagner. That could be his last Test match. He turned 37 on the final day, and I didn't really mention it at the start, but he was very injured. He had more than one injury whilst he was sprinting down for that final run.
I think Neil Wagner is the kind of cricketer who always has more than one injury on the go. He's kind of, at this point, held together by kind of masking tape and just pure anger, I think. And it was an amazing moment because what was List finish? I think it was something wrong with his hamstring. Broken toe, I think, which I think he maybe just always has, and also a bulging disc somewhere, which sounds very uncomfortable. And yet, it wasn't just that he sprinted the single; he sprinted out to the middle as sort of a message to Williamson, being like, "I'm ready for this," and to Sri Lanka being like, "You're not going to get any any cheap runs saved here," kind of thing. And yeah, look, he's been absolutely incredible for New Zealand. Has done everything that they've kind of asked and more. I mean, he's become this sort of, Glenn McGrath of the bouncer in terms of his accuracy and his relentlessness with that. And yet there have been times when there's been one test, it might have been against Sri Lanka actually, I can't remember, but when there was an injury to one of the other bowlers on the final day, and so he just becomes a swing bowler again and takes 5 wickets doing it that way. If this is his last test, it's a very, very fitting way to go. But I mean, who knows with him, because he will extract absolutely everything out until he's more machine than man, kind of thing.
And he's over here this summer as well, isn't he? For a bit of county grind, just to patch himself up for a few months of endless overs in April and May. I don't know if the injuries are going to be serious enough to put that in any doubt, but I kind of imagine he'll just be here on day one, ready to go.
Yeah, I guess you're talking about New Zealand's schedule potentially being beneficial to Williams. I think it's beneficial to Wagner as well. He just kind of gives it absolutely everything for 4 tests in a home summer. Paul asks, this is a really good question. If you were bowling and the opposition needed one to win off the last ball of a Test match, what would you do? It struck me as a bit odd in that clip that there were no fielders in the camera view and the keeper was standing back. I get why the keeper was standing back, especially as Fernando was clearly wanting to bowl it short. But Ben, you made the point that Sri Lanka were in quite a weird position in terms of they kind of knew that in that last over, a lot of things were changing. Their predicament around the World Test Championship was changing. So it was quite hard to think clearly. And actually, maybe you have somebody in really short to sprint to the stumps to get the run out. But other than that, there's not really that much else you can do in that position. Yeah,
and there's also the factor of that I think they'd already gone way past the scheduled close in terms of time. So they would have been under pressure to get round from that point of view as well. And yeah, because they needed to win, obviously, to keep their World Test Championship hopes alive. So actually, by the time the final ball came, although it was, they still obviously didn't want to lose the game because they want to be able to win a series in New Zealand. there would have been that at play as well. They think like, oh, actually, this has kind of gone. I can see how your heads kind of go a bit, and that's what happens in these tight situations. Like that's far from the most egregious error that a team has made when a test match has got close. You go back to, I don't want to bring up Headingley 2019
Sounds like
completely
you do.
egregiously, but
Tom Hickson of Smithfield is an award-winning online premium butcher that specialises in supplying the finest produce from around the world. With their exceptional selection of superb cuts, supplying high-end London and Mayfair restaurants, hotels and pitmasters across the UK, you can indulge in restaurant-quality meat delivered straight to your doorstep this Mother's Day. Tom Hickson's carefully sourced ranges of Wagyu beef, Iberico pork, New Zealand lamb and free-range poultry from the best suppliers in the world. Tom Hickson's have got you covered this Mother's Day, from juicy steaks and succulent ribs to savoury sausages and tender briskets. Enjoy an exclusive 15% off your order using code Wisden15. We'll leave that in the description for you later. The final India-Australia test was played at a very different tempo to the first three games. This one didn't come that close to result. Virat Kohli scored his first test 100 since 2019. Usman Khawaja put together an epic of his own, and Shubman Gill continued his ridiculous year across formats for India. Joe, a 2-1 defeat is the joint best result by a touring side in India over the last 10 years, equaling what Australia did themselves the last time they went. How do you think this tour should be remembered, and how do you think Australia should be feeling? They've lost it, but it's a pretty good loss.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to get your head around, isn't it? Because, I mean, I said at the start I didn't give them much of a chance, but I think quite a few people did. But then at 2-0 down, and given the manner of the defeats, they looked absolutely stuffed. So I think to come away with a 2-1 defeat after the first two tests is a great result for them, really. I think it is. And I didn't really expect them to do any better than that at the start. So I think I think really it's probably about as much as you can hope for as a touring team out there, a touring team with some quite clear deficiencies. The spin department stacked up a lot better. The Aussie spin department stacked up a lot better than I think a lot of people thought they would. I know Dravid said it was the best overall team of spinners that they'd faced since Swan and Panesar, I think, which is it's a long time ago now. And there's inexperience there. Todd Murphy was actually obviously a great result to come out of that series. Lyon was back to his best for a lot of it. I think there's a lot of positives for Australia to take, and a few that I didn't see in there. It does look still like an ageing side that is coming to the end of something here. As does India as well in some ways. So it's quite an interesting final that we've got in store, which is, the culmination of the Test Championship cycle, but also feels like maybe the culmination for quite a lot of those players' careers. Will Warner play in that final? It looks like he probably will, from what Andrew McDonald has been saying, but I don't think he's got much kind of to run after that. I think averages mid-20s in England, so there's no guarantee that he'll play the Ashes. So yeah, it was a sort of almost kind of as you were, really, and probably about as much as you could hope for in fearsomely demanding conditions out there.
I kind of see what you're saying, and that there is definitely a case you made that Australia should be kind of happy with this, but it is also still a missed opportunity, I think. Like, if you go back, I guess there's two things. You go to the first test, the non-selection of Travis Head, and then with how well he did in the rest of the series, you're looking like just what's gone on there, basically. And then and then in the second test, just that collapse when they all just started sweeping it for no real reason. It even seemed like it was a plan. They just all kind of had a shared collective thought at once, and then just got out basically the same way. Those two things should bug them, I think, and especially because as much as touring sides don't go to India and come away with even this result, this is an Indian side that more than any in the last decade, really, since that 2012 series, or since at least a few years after that, has been like vulnerable. And also Australia managed to sort of expose some of those vulnerabilities to an extent that we might not have seen. Like, Rohit obviously made that brilliant 100 in the first innings of the first test, and I don't think made it to 35 the rest of the series. Like, if you've got Pant out and you're limiting Rohit to that degree,
Boomer out for the series as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and at that point you're kind of thinking like, and also, and then from the batting point of view, although they obviously struggled against the spinners overall, they kind of decoded and diffused the Akshar Patel threat when he's been such a big factor in India's success over the last year and a half kind of thing. So I think the other thing, I think I might be in a minority of almost one on this, but I think if I were an Australia fan, I'd be slightly deflated at their approach in the last test as well. Like, I think I've just been watching England a bit too much. But if you're 2-1 down in the series, like, kind of what have you got to lose? And I know their path to victory was extremely narrow after they got India out on the final evening. But if Ben Stokes were the captain in that situation, maybe England would probably have lost the game. But what they would have done would have been try to score really, really quickly. And at that point, if you only need to score at that speed for the last half an hour on that day, and then for a session, and then maybe like a couple of absolutely mad overs after lunch, and then you have the final 2 sessions on a wearing pitch, everything has to go right there. It's very unlikely to happen. But equally, you're 2-1 down, and from 3 days in, Australia were basically at that point just content to settle for a creditable 2-1 defeat, which is fine. It is creditable, but equally it was a bit of, and also this has also been, as Border-Gavaskar trophies go, actually no close tests, right? And also just very little of the niggle that makes these series so enjoyable sometimes. Apart from the first day, you had the Jadeja finger cream gate, and then since then,
that wasn't much, was it?
Exactly.
It all felt very nicey nice. And I think I absolutely take that point about the way Australia played. I guess it all comes down to how much you value the draw, and we know that Ben Stokes does not value the draw. And actually, a draw in India is perceived as quite a valuable thing because it's so hard to do anything out there at all. But certainly that was an India side that were vulnerable, and they were not there for the taking, certainly. But there were chinks in the armour that could have been better exploited. And I suppose from an Australian point of view, if you think, well, Smith and Labuschagne, and say they need to score big runs if we're going to win the series, between them they passed 50 once in 8 knocks. So that's your best players not playing at their best, and you've come away with a 2-1 defeat. Perhaps there could have been a bit more, but I just didn't really see it as a realistic possibility at any stage.
Throwing it forward to the World Test Championship final.
Are we just going to ignore Kohli getting a Test 100 altogether?
You mentioned it.
I mentioned
it,
okay, and fine. Quite a few people got run this game.
That's true. Yeah.
They only took 22 wickets across the whole Test match.
But it's not like he scores them every week, though, is it?
That is true. You had the stat of since September 2022. Only Shubman Gill has more international hundreds than Virat Kohli in the world.
That wasn't my stat. That was Wisden India social editor Shubman Pandey's stat. And then I said that since March 12th or something, he's got the most international hundreds out of anyone.
But Joe, you've got the World Test Championship final that you wanted. And I think I'm coming around to this being the one that we all really should want. And your point on the ages is a good one. That India team is really old. So they had 6 players in that Test match who were 34 and over, and only Shubman Gill was under the age of 28 for India. So it feels like you're coming towards the end of 2 of this era's most successful teams. You've got the added complication that it's just a week after the IPL.
Yeah.
So neither side is going to be that acclimatised. You might have a couple of players playing in the county championship, but not more than 2
Smith
or 3.
And Labuschagne.
Really. And Pujara.
And Rahane. I mean, I could actually see Rahane getting 300 for last year, and all of a sudden he's back in contention.
Although he's playing the IPL, so he's coming over after the IPL.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know how much cricket he'll play before that match.
But yeah, I mean that's going to be a huge event here at the Oval. How do you see that going? I mean, you don't get many neutral Test matches.
No, it's a really, really hard one to pick. I mean, I would lean towards Australia in these conditions, I think. I think they'll probably have slightly better preparation. The IPL is so dominating in India. I think attention isn't going to turn until that match until quite late in the day, whereas, albeit a lot of Australians are at the IPL, I think that will be much more of a focus. Also, they're building up to something in the Ashes, whereas in India, again, like they came over last summer, it's a sort of a bit of a one-off, slightly odd occasion. India will obviously be desperate to win, having been beaten by New Zealand surprisingly last time. But yeah, I think I would lean just towards Australia. But I just hope it's a really high quality game. I think it will be close, But the concern is with the IPL right up, that's right, pushing up against the deadline, that you get players arriving who are a bit knackered, haven't played red ball cricket for a while. Is it really going to do justice to the whole cycle that we try and talk up as much as possible, but often doesn't quite deliver in terms of a coherent tournament? Like, are we going to get the finale that we deserve? Not sure on that. I really, really hope so.
You want a 5-day test match. You don't want a team that's not faced the red ball for 2 months to face the Duke's ball on an overcast morning, and they're 50 for 7 or something like
That's
that.
it. You need proper runs. You need whoever bats first to get proper runs, and then the team to reply to get runs, and then you've got a proper game. But the fear is that you get 150 plays 180, and then it might be an exciting game, but is it the high quality World Test Championship final that you want? That's what I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I mean, we just need Lee Fortis to roll out an absolutely classic oval pitch, don't we? And I guess in one sense it's good that it's here rather than at Lord's, because the oval, I know last year's pitch was a spicy one, but in general, it's been a bit easier to score runs here. I think I would make Australia quite significant favourites, I think. I think if India had Bumrah and Pant, it would be much closer, but I think Australia would still be slight favourites now. I think because you're obviously thinking back to how well India competed in 2021, but there's quite a lot that's different since then, I guess. Firstly, those players that are out, and also just KL Rahul's form having dropped off so significantly. I think that
Border-Gavaskar suggested that he should take the gloves, which I quite like as an idea, actually.
Yeah, I don't mind that. And was it as keeper that he made that brilliant 100 at the Oval in 2018 as well? Was it? Oh, sorry, Pant was keeping, but he did. But I guess he has runs here. Yeah, I would not be averse to that. But yeah, I think I know that with some of the Australians, you're looking at can they score runs here as well? But you've got Smith proven in England, Labuschagne. I know he didn't get 100 in 2019, but he was very good. Kawaj just looks like he can get it anywhere, heads in the form of his life. I think I would back Australia to be able to, and that they'll have a better bowling attack as well, because without Bumrah in these sorts of conditions, that's a much stronger attack, I would say, and a better batting lineup. So,
were you going to say something? Joe, how do you feel about the Ashes? I think we're allowed to talk about the Ashes now. England only have one Test match before then. Australia have only got one Test match before then.
Yeah.
I feel like the vibe in England is that England are favourites, but I also think this is the best Australia team since 2005, or at least the best Australia side to tour England since 2005. And going on what's just happened in India, I think it's really significant that a few players who haven't had that much success outside of Australia had really good series. I know the conditions are a world apart to here, but Khawaja having that good a series, Travis Head scoring runs, Cam Green doing well at the end of the series. I think that's just quite significant ahead of the summer to come, because I think we're quite used to basically Australia being Smith plus maybe one other when they come over here, but it feels like Australia might have more than that this time.
Yeah, I'm still not sure anything that Khawaja has done over the last 18 months, which, don't get me wrong, has been absolutely brilliant, shows that he can now play the seaming ball in English conditions. Like he hasn't passed that test yet. It's not to say he can't, but he has tried quite a lot in the past and it hasn't succeeded. So I don't think there's any guarantee that he comes here. We know batting at the top of the order in these conditions is incredibly tough, and being in great form helps, but it doesn't solve everything. Same with Heads. Again, I mean, he's not done great in his few opportunities over here. He plays in a certain style which could come off, but could also easily not come off. So I think. I was just thinking, is it the best side since 2005? That sounds a big statement, but I can't think of a better one.
Yeah, I think it's because I completely agree with you that there's nothing to say that any of those guys will do well. But I guess Labuschagne is more established than he was in 2019. He obviously didn't start the 2019 series. And the bowling attack isn't quite 100% at the moment. It's still got fitness issues over Hazelwood. They haven't really played as a whole pack for a while.
You could see Boland doing very well over
exactly.
Over here. Yeah, and I think if we think that Australia haven't won a Test series over here since 2001, at this moment in time with the England Test team as it is, doesn't feel the time that's going to change. Really, it's not to say it can't, but it doesn't feel that way. And I would go, yeah. I mean, do you want a scoreline? Are we there?
No,
already?
not yet. No.
Oh, right, fine.
I'm not going to hold you.
You don't want my top run scorer and my top wicket.
Not now. Ben, I thought you made a really interesting point about Australia in close Test matches. So if you think the two teams are evenly matched, Australia just don't win many close Test matches. And that kind of has to come into it when you're looking ahead to a series where you think the two sides might be relatively evenly matched.
Yeah, especially because England have won series in England like this before. You think back to that 4-1 win in 2018 against India when you had, at least 3 really good, or 2 of England's wins in there could easily have gone the other way and didn't. And actually 3 of them, if you count the Oval Test as well, where India came back into it on the last day. And that's kind of, England, I think, are good at winning close Test match. I know they didn't in that last Test in New Zealand, but in general, they seem like they can kind of hold their nerve when it gets close. Whereas I'm trying to remember what the stat was. I think it's winning by 6 wickets or fewer or 100 runs or fewer. Australia haven't done that in like 7 years, I think, and have lost Tests by that margin 6 times in that time. And that makes sense, actually, if you look at overall, because you can't really find that many statement series wins for Australia in that time. Like, they've lost, I think, 3 series at home, 2 to India, 1 to Africa.
They basically obliterate everyone at home, but then lose to India and don't win in Asia. Pakistan away, but again, given what happened what else happened in Pakistan in the last 12 months, that no longer looks quite as impressive as it did at the time.
Yeah, and yet that's an Australia 11 when you look at them statistically and in terms of reputation, you've got absolutely loads of great players in there. In, Warner's an Australia great, Labuschagne will be in Australia an all-time great, Smith is an all-time great. What you've got, all the bowlers are one of those 2 categories, and yet they don't really that the results have not matched up to the reputation of their players. And I think that's why, is because they can build up those numbers when they smash teams, and when it gets to close games, they haven't been able to do it. I mean, that could be a bit of statistical noise as well. Like, it's not a huge sample size of close games, but equally, I think that, and that's where captaincy can also come in. And, Ben Stokes versus Pat Cummins, the captaincy face-off could go some way to determining it as well, I suppose.
And actually, that was the caveat I wanted to throw in there. So Ben Stokes clearly has got, it's kind of like England's Neil Wagner, really. He's clearly carrying a lot of injuries, and he gets by, and he knows how to manage them. But we know he's going to play the Ireland Test. So 6 Test matches with the Ashes in a short space of time. Can he really play all of them? And if he can't, his absence now, even though he's probably less important to England as a player than he has been for quite some time, in terms of they can probably cover his runs and he's not bowling that many overs, in terms of what he actually means to the team and what flows from him, that would be a massive, massive, massive concern if he's not there now. All the stuff that the players say, it's all about Stokesy this, Stokesy that. He makes me feel this. He makes me feel I can do that. He's making these decisions on the field. NASA saying it's the greatest captaincy performance he's ever seen at Rawalpindi. If he's not there, and you have Ollie Pope leading England out, or Joe Root,
Broad. It'd be Broad.
Or Broad. I think it would be Pope. I think they've been, at least the noise from within the camp is kind of suggesting that's where they're heading. There was sort of that big sort of like Pope future England captain kind of media push that was going on. Broad said that he really liked what he saw, and Pope might well have a very good tactical brain. I mean, he doesn't. But
the problem is he doesn't, and he doesn't have the career behind him, the license to make the decisions that Stokes does. Stokes can basically do what he wants, and if it doesn't come off, well, it's Ben Stokes. Ollie Pope does not have that luxury at this stage in his career. Probably never will, because he's not that kind of character. So there are lots of ifs and buts here, but I just think having one player who is so absolutely critical to the cause is not a great position to be in when they're struggling with injuries and fitness concerns in the way that Stokes has for a number of years.
Well, I mean, all the stuff you were saying about Australia not having a great record in close Test matches, they've not got a statement overseas win. These 6 Test matches present a massive opportunity. You almost think like this Australia era gets defined by what happens in the next 6 Test matches, which is very exciting. Make live streaming cricket a breeze. Are you or your club looking to live stream your cricket matches this season? Look no further than Sport Radar's Frogbox streaming kit to turn your fixtures into professional quality broadcasts. Frogbox is the all-in-one streaming kit that makes broadcasting live cricket accessible and affordable for clubs, schools and leagues. Designed for recreational cricket, the Frogbox solution is the lightweight, portable and affordable product designed for clubs of all levels. Integrated with the Play Cricket Scorer app, all you need to do on match day is set up the portable video capture kit and live score the match on the app. The automated technology will take care of the rest. Stream to YouTube with high-quality graphics and generate highlights of your greatest moments and connect with your community like never before. Frogbox professionally showcases cricket at any level while offering new revenue and fan engagement opportunities for clubs. The automated graphic packages have multiple displays and advertising opportunities available, engaging the end user and delivering high-quality visibility for your corporate partners. Capture those special moments with automated highlight generation and join the streaming revolution with Sport Radar's Frogbox. Visit the website www.frogbox.live for further information and start reimagining the digital matchday experience this season. Sounds very exciting. Bangladesh thumped England 3-0 in a T20I series this week. The big talking point, it's not really a big talking point, it was kind of the only talking point from an England point of view. England opted not to call up a spare batter following Will Jackson's injury, which left them with a really imbalanced side with Chris Woakes and Chris Jordan not really bowling that much. The thinking was that you might as well give Moeen and Sam Curran more time in the middle as batters rather than someone who's unlikely to play World Cup cricket in the next year or two. Ben, do you have strong thoughts on that?
No, and I mean England.
Is that shrewd thinking, or is that disrespecting the sanctity of bilateral T20s?
Well, I don't even think it's either of those. I mean, I think they basically just couldn't really be bothered. Essentially, right?
Wouldn't that be disrespecting the sanctity?
Yes, that is true. Yeah,
assuming that there is a sanctity there in the first place.
Sure there's much of one. But.
Yeah, it's more the latter. I mean, is this up there with one of the most pointless series England have ever played, right? Like a T20.
Maybe not from Bangladesh's perspective.
No. From an England point of view, and we'll get on to Bangladesh. And I don't want to do down Bangladesh achievement here because it is a really sizable one. Their first series win over England in any format ever is obviously massive. And you know, they are so good in these conditions, they might have beaten even a full strength England. But I mean, it's just this is a series at the end of a very, very long winter when they've gone Pakistan, Australia, back to Pakistan, South Africa, New Zealand, and Bangladesh. That's 6 tours technically, and this is a T20 series, so there's not even any sort of element of World Cup prep in it really. The next T20 World Cup is going to be in West Indies and the USA conditions that will be very, very different to these, and they kind of just wanted to get through it. Hence the
sometimes in the Caribbean you get conditions not that dissimilar to this. In fairness,
yes, yeah. I mean, but we'll get on to conditions in Bangladesh in a bit, I guess. But yeah, I guess the thing is England clearly weren't that bothered about if they won or lost these games. If they were, they would have called up, someone like Ollie Pope or Zach Crawley, who was, Ollie Pope was there in the studio, and you wondered like he might have been quite useful. Exactly, a T20I cap, a white ball cap for England. But if you're an England fan, I can see why you might think like, hold on, I really like it when England win, and they're not putting themselves in a great position to do so here. Like, why should I kind of be caring about these games? And that is a difficult thing. I mean, we had the question about Butler and Mott and England's record under them.
So Chris asked, are results under the Mott-Butler era going too much under the radar? Only 2 bilateral series wins out of 9. I'm kind of like, they won a World Cup.
That's it. I mean, it is World Cups, isn't it? Everything is building towards World Cups. And Ben, as you say, some fans might be like, well, hang on, I want to see England trying to do everything they can to win. Well, they would argue they are, but trying to win a World Cup, not trying to win a bilateral series in Bangladesh.
Yeah, really. But equally, I don't even see how this series helps them win next year's World Cup.
I mean, it's pretty negligible at that bit, isn't it? Really, that argument.
Yeah,
I do think they're in some players not doing particularly well. I think we know they have put themselves out of contention.
Phil Salt's had a bad week.
Yeah, Phil Salt's not had a particularly good tour, and I think especially with a question mark in the ODI for the ODI World Cup at least about whether or not Stokes will come back. Sam Curran's had a few batting opportunities, and on those kind of wickets has really, really struggled in both formats. I think he had 1 good innings in the ODIs. But that, I guess, that is knowledge they didn't have before, potentially. And Moeen Ali's had a few more batting opportunities, and he's done okay without doing great. So I guess they have learned some stuff. And we did talk about on last week's pod about how in these series where we've kind of said why they're playing them, Milan has kind of got himself into 2 World Cup squads by doing really well in these series that for everyone else is like, why are they happening? Well, Milan dominates them.
Yeah. Should we talk about Bangladesh though?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Because those celebrations in the second game, because you're kind of thinking like, you're looking at it from an England point of view and thinking like, what's the point in this? England not really trying. And then you see them celebrate at that and you're like, okay, this really matters to Bangladesh. And they did play really, really well. I mean, it's just worth touching on. Just T20 cricket is so different in Bangladesh than anywhere else. Like, I've got a few stats. So it's the only full member country where this is all since the start of 2019, where more than half of the overs are bowled by spinners. And then scoring rates overall in Bangladesh is a combined strike rate of about 106, which is...
What?
Yeah.
So the
Since
average
the start
run
of
rate is just
2019,
basically sixes and a bit.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
I mean, well, because you had that series. This was, in a way, quite a high-scoring series, Bangladesh. You had that Australia series last year when I can't remember if a team got to 130 or 140 throughout it, which is not to denigrate what Bangladesh are doing and what they've achieved, because there's no question that they're fair surfaces in that, each team has an equal chance on them, and they are the absolute masters on these kind of wickets. Like, they have batters who can get like defendable totals, spinners who are really, really effective on these wickets, and Shakib is obviously kind of a genius who can both score quickly on these pitches and consistently, and also bowl and be unhittable. I mean, that final over today, when it's the 19th over, England are still theoretically in with the sniff, and he takes a wicket, goes for 4 runs, and the game is done. That's the kind of thing that he just does week in, week out on these pitches. I guess the only question is they've not really come close to making the semis in either T20 World Cup when they've actually been very good at home in T20I cricket, and you wonder whether these pitches are they're practicing on pitches that aren't like they'll come up against in a world tournament. But then equally, like there is an aspect of that, but also series wins in of themselves are achievements and things worth celebrating, and they have won this fair and square and completely outplayed England. And if there was a T20 World Cup played in Bangladesh, they would be like right up there among the favourites for it, I guess.
And there are some players who you look at and you can kind of see how they would have a lot of success in Bangladesh, but might struggle on pitches like Australia. So like Shanto had a brilliant series across both ODIs and T20s, but he's not got the best record out of Bangladesh. But you see some players like Liton Das, Taskin, Hassan Mahmood, who York's butler in the second game, you hope they would do well overseas. And, I get the conditions are very different, but they do have the ingredients of a side that should be doing better. And if you get slow pitches in Ghana, for example, at the T20 World Cup next year, you can see them doing okay. Jofra Archer was amazing in this series. What do you think his next six or so months look like? He's going to be the main man at Mumbai in the IPL because Bumrah's out injured, and so is Joe Richardson. How realistic should we be about how much cricket he plays for England, with the Ashes in particular, with basically no first-class cricket behind him since his return?
Yeah, it's tricky. It's sort of trying to map a route that he can actually play some Test cricket, and it's not immediately clear. I can't see how he can play the first Ashes Test. I just don't see that he's going to get any red ball cricket. I mean, he could play the Ireland Test, but I don't think he's going to get a game for Sussex before then. If he goes the distance in the IPL, his workload is, it's T20 cricket, but he is going to be, as you say, the leader of that attack. Mumbai Indians aren't going to be thinking, well, maybe we should give him a bit of a breather because we don't want him kind of getting another injury before the Ashes. He's going to play every game that he's available for out there. I still think there's a good chance that he plays in the Ashes, but I think it will be, by the 3rd, 4th, 5th test when he's actually got a chance to play some championship cricket for Sussex whilst the Ashes is ongoing. I think there were 5 championship matches over the course of the Ashes, so that's a decent handful of matches for him to get going. And obviously so much of it depends on how England are going in the series and how their quicks are going. If Mark Wood is fit and firing, then the need for Jofra Archer is that much less, especially when there's a World Cup to come in the autumn, T20 World Cup the following year. Thing with Archer, he can do it all, and you want him to do it all, and this is partly why we're in the mess. Well, we were in the mess that we were because he broke down because he was being, well, it may have happened anyway, but there was a suspicion was that he was being overused, and that led to some of the injuries that he's had. So I think we might see him in 1 or 2 Ashes tests. Don't think he'll be at the start of the series, and I think given the injury how he's had, that would be a decent result, really.
Yeah, I agree. It would be a decent result. Equally, like fitness and bodies and medicine are just weird things, and things that you wouldn't expect to be possible sometimes just do happen. And sometimes players have a long period of lots of different injuries and then do just have a protracted run of just not really having any issues at all. I mean, you think back to Pat Cummins, who missed like 6 years after his Test debut, and then is bowling just like constantly at like high 80s for years after that, and basically not missing a game. And there might also be a case that actually bowling 4 overs every few days is the kind of just the tick over thing that Archer needs. Like, you also get bowlers who go through a period of getting injured, coming back, bowling for a bit, getting injured again because their bodies just kind of aren't used to it. I think Chris Wokes especially has struggled with that at times. And it might be that Archer, I'm not saying Archer will play 5 tests, but equally I think the way England will approach it is kind of have good people around him just monitoring his fitness, and hope that Mumbai Indians take a bit of care about that as well, and then just see how he is when he arrives back. And if he does arrive back and they look at the zone that he's in and it's not red, I wouldn't be surprised if they do just say, like, actually, yeah, why not go and just crank up at the speed of light against Warner or whoever it happens to be opening.
I think the other thing it's important to remember with Archer, because he hasn't played Test cricket for so long, is that with white ball cricket, he is an absolute world-class superstar, top, arguably the best fast bowler in the world, certainly top 3. That's not what he was in Test cricket. There were some moments of absolute brilliance. We all remember the spells at Lords. But there were also quite a lot of times where people were saying he shouldn't be in the side and complaining about the fact that he wasn't bowling at 90 miles an hour all the time. That's not going to have changed because he's been out for 2 years. That's only going to have got worse, if anything. So I think that's going to be in England's mind as well, that he is not a ready-made world-class test bowler at this stage. He's a bowler who can produce world-class spells, but I don't think you can expect him just to dominate an Ashes series, because there isn't really the kind of track record to prove that's the case. If they're thinking about using their best players in the best possible way, they might decide, well, he's so important to us in a World Cup. He's just a bonus for the Ashes and not much more than that.
I'm sure that's the kind of balance that people come to the podcast for. Let's head to Butch for his thoughts on the Bangladesh series, as well as a record-breaking week in the PSL. At this point in the podcast, we were originally going to hear from Mark Butcher, who is out in Pakistan, about a week of record-breaking run scoring in the PSL. But unfortunately, the internet is basically down across most of Lahore at the moment. So we'll upload a separate video on YouTube later in the week where Butch will tell us all about what's been happening in the PSL and also get his early predictions on how Australia will get on in the English summer. Ben, what's your moment of the week?
Oh yeah, my moment of the week is from the Women's Premier League, and with Sophie Eccleston bowling to Hayley Matthews, and it's a ball that Hayley Matthews just goes, blocks back. Sophie Eccleston has a sort of a polite inquiry and says, "Was that maybe boot first?" And then she sort of convinces Alyssa Healy to go up for review. They do. At first, you'll think like this is one of those very funny all-time bad reviews contenders, because from the very first bit of footage you see, it's just very clear that Hayley Matthews has middled her defensive shot, and that's absolutely fine. What's happened as well is that, so she's middled the defensive shot, it's then gone and hit her boot and then hit the ground. What then happens is the umpire goes through the ultra edge protocol, but what they somehow managed to do was to reverse the footage. So because to begin with it went ground, bat, boot, ground, they've reversed it so it goes ground, boot, bat, ground. So all of a sudden they're saying, like, okay, yeah, it's boot first. You can go to ball tracking. Ball tracking still has the point of impact, the point when the ball hit the bat. So everything is kind of going awry here. And yet Hayley Matthews is given out to begin with. And the only person who kind of realises there's definitely been an error here is Sophie Eccleston. So the as it goes to, I think she realises that the error is kind of happening when it goes to ball track on the big screen, because they wouldn't have done that unless they think it was boot first. And so when that happens, you can see her looking at it, shaking her head, saying, "That's not out. That's not out." And then when the umpire raises her finger, Sophie Eccleston is behind her, sort of like crossing her arms, saying, "That's not out." And then as soon as the umpire raises the finger as well, she then runs to Hayley Matthews and says, like, "Just wait. There's basically saying, like, there's definitely been something wrong here. Just hang about a bit." Her Hayley Matthews' batting partner Yastika Bhatia, I think, then makes the review sign again, sort of like seemingly saying, "Can we review that review, please?" And then they go through it again, and then it's kind of it's completely chaotic when the thing that what the third umpire is saying. Eventually, they get to the right decision. And then I think Eccleston gets Matthews a few overs later anyway. So, but yeah, that was my moment of the week, just because it was very funny, and also just kudos to Sophie Eccleston for being for having a career ahead of her as a TV umpire, if nothing else.
It's been good again. I think we've only really had like one very close game, but I've liked how high scoring it's been. I mean, Alyssa Healy was 4 underway from becoming the first Centurion. She hit 96, not out in a run chase. Shafali Verma hit 76 off 28. Alice Captey's been whacking it. She's not had a massive innings yet, but she's been scoring very, very quickly.
That's a Brunt going nicely as well, plenty of runs.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have enjoyed it, but it would have been nice to have a few more close games. I know just not much you can do about that as tournament organisers. And also RCB have been so rubbish that it is a shame when you go into games thinking like there's quite a high chance that this is going to be a one-sided affair, and they're basically already out of it after 5 games. But yeah,
I think it's, for me, it's kind of illustrated just how strong Australia's depth is, even more than I thought it was. Like Jess Jonathan, who's not really required with the bat for Australia in T20 cricket, has had like 2 innings of 30 or 15 or whatever to win games. You're like, well, Australia don't even need her. Yeah, she's one of the best finishers in this tournament. Elsewhere, South Africa beat West Indies 2-0. Temba Bavuma scored his first Test 100 in 6 years, and he was absolutely brilliant. I watched quite a lot of that innings, and I know that 100 stat's been hanging over him for quite a long time, but he is quite a consistent player in quite a inconsistent and misfiring batting lineup. But he basically fails as rarely as anyone in the world. So I hope this is the kind of innings that he can use as a platform to go on a bit of a run.
It feels like he's now found. It was just very awkward with the white ball captaincy because he clearly didn't really deserve it. South Africa with some good young shot makers coming through in it, and he just didn't really warrant his place in that side. And he had the kind of the albatross of the captaincy hanging around his neck. Now he's the Test captain, and that just looks like a much better role suited to him. He's a really good Test player. The record doesn't necessarily show that quite yet, but hopefully this is the kind of start of a chapter where he's in the right place, doing the right things.
And Ben, you made the point that even though that it looked like 2 quite one-sided Test matches, in the end in South Africa's favour, the cricket throughout the 2 Tests was actually pretty balanced for a lot of it, and you had some really good passages of play.
Yeah, and I think West Indies they should be disappointed that they weren't more competitive. And in a way, when you look back at especially the first Test, but also the second a bit, it was actually kind of decided on the first day, and then it almost looked close, and it was from then on. Like these were quite they were good pitches for fast bowling, and as we've talked about before, South Africa have a side that is set up to have short games on those kind of surfaces because their bowling attack is so good and their batting attack is kind of brittle. And West Indies are kind of similar as well. But I think, that means that some of the runs scored in the series were of a very high quality. I think, especially some of the South Africans against what is a good West Indies attack.
And Joe, you're looking ahead to the English summer. Your moment of the week was from this Test as well.
Yeah, really nasty freak injury to Keshav Maharaj, the South African spinner, who ruptured his Achilles tendon on the final day at Joburg. It was kind of an odd one that he had an appeal against Carl Mayers turned down. Bavuma reviews the decision and they see it overturned on the big screen, and Maharaj sort of heads to sprint off to celebrate and does his tendon whilst doing that, collapses in a heap, and he's stretched it off. This is just the last ball before the lunch break. So it kind of initially looks quite funny, and then you realise that actually something quite bad has happened here. And they reckon he's out for probably 6 months or so, which he'd have probably been, I reckon he'd have been in that World Cup squad in India, and that he doesn't play all the ODIs, but they want spin options there. He's a good white ball bowler. And yeah, from a county perspective, Middlesex had signed him for, I think it was 8 championship games in the whole of the Blast. Looked a really, really good signing for Middlesex back in Division 1 this year. Looking a little bit like their squad, I would say, for Div 1, and he added a bit of extra class to it, and obviously there's no chance he's going to be taking up that deal now. So bad news for South Africa, bad news for Middlesex, and obviously bad news for the man himself. Looked really nasty.
I didn't realise it was after a review. That somehow makes it even worse somehow. Like if a bowler is sort of in their follow through, jumps up and then lands, but when you have all that period, oh god, that's
I think that's probably, if it's during the course of an appeal, I think you probably don't get injured in the same way, because it was from being stationary and then pushing off that he's actually ruptured his tendon.
Yeah, and because he was weirdly left out for the first Test, so now I guess is wishing he'd been weirdly left out for the second Test as well. Yeah.
Do you want to hear my moment of the week?
Yeah.
So Saturday night, it's Forfarshire versus some French side in the European Cricket League final. I was genuinely watching this. I was at a friend's house and we kind of had a great day of sport. We watched the PSL, then we watched the Six Nations, then we watched a bit of the Premier League, and then we're like, what's on? Scrolling the channels, we find that it's Forfarshire versus some French side in the European Cricket League final. Very high scoring, tiny boundaries. I'm kind of amazed that cricket at that level is broadcast at such a high standard, but it's broadcast at such a high standard, and some of the cricket's really good, but some of it's not great, and it's all on Astro. But you've got also quite a lot of people there because obviously the cricket's been played in Malaga, so it's obviously quite a nice place to go, and I'm sure
So
everyone
people wandering through rather than
that's true.
We had the other bit of broadcast cricket this week as well, didn't we?
That viral,
yeah.
What happened in that one again? Some guy.
So it was. I can take you through it because I, for some reason, wrote a blow by blow explainer of it. It's kind of stuff that you have to do. So it was basically a leading edge that goes to short third. The guy he thinks like, am I going to get
what cricket are we talking about here?
It's really hard to tell. It's a 4-over game.
Right.
The team batting side of chasing 41 and they're 9 for 3.
Country or we don't?
No,
we don't know that.
No,
it's definitely not international cricket.
Yeah. Anyway, so he sees the ball. For a moment he thinks about catching it. Then he decides, no, I'm not going to get there. So I'm going to just stand there and let it bounce, come to me. Bounces, but it spins. This is a tennis ball, by the way, I'm pretty sure. Bounces, spins past him. He runs after it, not hugely athletically. Also, no one is wearing proper sports kit. He's wearing like some sort of like sneakers, essentially. I think I described him as looking like a man wearing a towel running away from a fire. And then he eventually catches up with the ball, but because it's bobbling around a lot, he sort of rounds the ball and then gets it. Then as he gets it, he slips over. And then he, for some reason, thinks, okay, I'm going to throw this in while lying on my back. And then as he throws it, his leg just shoots up, kicks the ball back behind him over the boundary for 4.
And all on camera. Yeah.
That's why they're filming it.
Yeah, that is why they're filming it. We're going to finish the show with a few...
What happened to Forfarshire?
I think they lost. I didn't manage to pull through.
So the moment
to
of the week
game.
was that it was happening.
It was happening.
Not a specific moment from the game.
I did watch the first half of the Forfarshire run chase.
They had Michael Leese.
They had Michael Leese who plays for Scotland, and he got out quite early. So I presume they didn't win.
You'd presumably had a few by this point, given that you've been watching sport all afternoon.
Yeah, that was what
details are getting slightly hazy.
That was our 4th major sporting viewing of the day. I'm going to finish the show with a few emails that we've had in. So this is from Jake. Good afternoon. My name is Jake, and I run the Runs for Research initiative. We are fundraising. We are a fundraising cause that supports Alzheimer's research in the UK through the performances of club cricketers. The idea was born out of my own love for club cricket and following the passing of my grandfather, a club cricketer in his day, who, along with my father, inspired myself and my sister into playing the game we all love. Each player signs up at the start of the season, committing to a donation to Alzheimer's research based on the runs scored or wickets taken at their own club level. Each run is worth 5p and each wicket is worth 50p. 2023 will be the 3rd year of the initiative, and we have grown over each of these seasons. Year 1 saw just over 250 players involved from across the country, raising just short of £6,000. In year 2, we grew to 530 players and managed to collect more than £11,000, bringing our total across the 2 years to nearly £17,000. As we move into the 3rd year, our sign-ups have been open since the 1st of February, and we're closing in on 450 players already signed up, and we've still got a month until the season starts, with a large number of sign-ups over the last 2 years coming once the season has kicked off. You can go to runs4research.org.uk if you want to get involved. We'll leave the link in the description. That sounds like quite a cool thing to do this season. If not yourself, but your whole club as well. That sounds like quite a fun and worthy cause to get behind. We got a email in from Simon from Australia. He says, "Hello, podcast team. Great show as always. I've listened to the show since 2019, and your collective knowledge and the easygoing nature of the show is a true delight. One slight negative, however, I dislike football immensely, and I find it difficult to deal with the fact that it infiltrates almost everything, even on a cricket podcast, it seems. This very small gripe aside, great work and keep it up."
Oh
Simon.
dear, I hope he's not watching on YouTube with that jumper he has.
That's true. This jumper is one for the YouTube audience. It's difficult. I think we all like football, so it just and that's probably
some of us might prefer football. To be honest,
I think so. I think that's a conversation we don't really want to go down too much.
Let's not open that can of worms.
But thanks for the kind word, Simon. And finally, we've also been nominated for some kind of podcast award. So the Sports Podcast Group have nominated us, shortlisted us for the best cricket podcast award. And I think it's based on some kind of public vote. So if you've got 1 hour and 15 minutes into this episode, I reckon you might like us and you might consider voting for us here. So again, we'll leave the link in the description. But if you go there, sign in, create an account. I think it's free to do that. Vote for us.
And tell your friends to vote for us.
tell
Even
your
if they don't
votes.
even watch the show, just fix it.
Yeah. Just spend a couple of hours telling everyone you know. Anyway, that is all we have time for on today's show. Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Ben. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We'll be back next week.